was so ridiculously nervous and uncomfortable because I thought that when I did these returns that they were going to hassle me, and I just couldn't deal with it. I mean, we're talking about returning clothes. I
Defective
left it on defective
clothes.
clothes. Yes, defective clothes to very nice brands who have very good reputations. And I walked up and I was like, hey, this is defective, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, no problem. And then the next place I went to, and I was like, hey, I bought these before Thanksgiving and they have a hole. They're my favorite jeans. And she's like, well, unfortunately, we don't have those anymore, but we can get you another pair and they fit great. So the point of the story is everything turned out completely fine. Everything was replaced or they gave us our money back or whatever. There was no drama. There was no conflict. But in my head, I had developed a whole story. Hi, I'm Jen.
And I'm Suzanne.
Today we are talking about predicting the future.
Some magic.
So I don't know if you feel like this, Suzanne, but do you ever have things in your life that make you uncomfortable so they stay on your to-do list forever because you are just sure you are going to meet conflict or uncomfortableness or something that you are basically avoiding? So it's
Procrastination City.
Yeah, it's a few months past Christmas. So I had 2 returns of clothes. One was jeans that got a hole in it that I bought before Christmas, actually before Thanksgiving. And then the other one was something else I needed to return, but I was pretty sure it was past the time. So I had defective and then probably past the time. Anywho, it sounds very innocuous and like not a big deal. Is innocuous the right word?
Innocuous, yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, I like to make up words or use them inappropriately. And so I had it on my to-do list forever. And then Jason and I were doing a little day date. And I was like, hey, we're going to do the day date at the mall at this really cute place called Italy. And then I'm going to go do these returns. So basically, I put something really fun with something I really didn't want to do. And the point is, I was so ridiculously nervous and uncomfortable because I thought that when I did these returns that they were going to hassle me, and I just couldn't deal with it. I mean, we're talking about returning clothes.
Defective.
I left it on defective clothes. Yes, defective clothes to very nice brands who have very good reputations. And I had to, well, let me just finish the story. So I did said returns and I walked up and I was like, hey, this is defective, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, no problem. And then the next place I went to and I was like, hey, I bought these before Thanksgiving and they have a hole. They're my favorite jeans. And she's like, well, unfortunately, we don't have those anymore, but we can get you another pair and they fit great. So the point of the story is everything turned out completely fine. Everything was replaced or they gave us our money back or whatever. There was no drama. There was no conflict. But in my head, I had developed a whole story about how I was going to, quote unquote, have to battle these people and be taken advantage of. And on the drive home, I was like, that went totally different than I expected. And this is what I was telling Jason. And I was like, I'm going to need to dive into why I made such a big deal and left this on my to-do list for 2 months.
Sure. Well, let's dive into it, right? So,
it's so wow.
Well, one, you're not alone. Hello. I do the same thing. We've talked about it before. But I think the first question I have is, why do you think that you procrastinated in the first place?
Well, I don't like to be uncomfortable. So let's just start there. If it makes me uncomfortable and it doesn't have like a deadline on it. So there's that. And it's not for someone else.
Right. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, two, that's twofold. So the first question I would have is, why were you uncomfortable? Like, what about that situation made you uncomfortable?
That I was going to have to defend myself and plead my case. By the way, Suzanne's the attorney, not me. Um, and somehow I had built up this story that I was going to be taken advantage of. I had built up a story around money,
Ooh,
that
what story was
it
that?
was like that it was wasted money, or that they were taking advantage of me over money. Really weird stuff about money came up.
So do you feel like that's a form of like you were villainizing them?
Hmm, no, I think it has to do with my very unhealthy relationship with money
How so?
and some sort of like controlling of it. Like if they gave me hassle or weren't going to give us the refund. Well, I guess the thing is I had to ask myself, okay, so what I will say is, and sorry, I'm backtracking, but before I did these returns when we were sitting at lunch, I said, you know what, I'm going to go in with the attitude of, okay, you know what, they don't give us back the money for either item. We have two defective items. Like, we're not homeless. We still have money for food. We just had a lovely date. Like, hey, I don't have to shop there anymore. So I just completely released myself of like any sort of expectation. I hoped that they would do the right thing, but just releasing myself of all
Mm.
expectation, I went in with a totally different vibe. I didn't go in angry. I didn't go in. I was just like, hey, I was like, just show up how you are. Hey, these are like I said, these are my favorite jeans. And they like randomly have a hole in them. And like, I think I even said to the girl, and I'm telling you, they're not tight. So I didn't like rip a hole in them. Like, I think I made some sort of like joke about it. And then the other one was just like an obvious, like running the thread of the sweater or whatever, but it was delivered via the mail. So it's not like we could check it before we bought it or whatever. So I will say that I had changed that. And so that was one of the things I realized is I had this whole made up, like I said, a whole made up story about what they were going to, but like, why was I so tied to the outcome?
Yeah. Well, and then also you had mentioned how it would have been different if it was for someone else.
Oh yeah. Well, that means I wouldn't have procrastinated. I would have still had all the same feelings, but if it was, something I didn't want to do, but like somebody else has asked me to do it for them and I had agreed to it, I would have done it in a timely manner.
So
But because
you'd
it was
push
mine.
past you'd push past the procrastination if it was for someone else, and you're
Mhm.
working on pushing past it now for yourself.
Right. And by taking away the expectation and just it is what it is. Like the idea that I have any control over how this works out is hilarious when you really think about it. I literally have no control over which person I get at the sales counter, if they're going to believe me, not believe me, if they're having a bad day, if they've just been told by corporate, do not take any more returns, no matter how messed up the situation. Like, you have literally no idea. Therefore, you have no control. The only person you have control over is actually showing up, going up to the counter, explaining the situation, and asking if there's something they can do. And once I realized that that's all I had control over, it was so freeing.
Mm,
And then I think I showed up differently with like a different vibe, probably. I have no idea. So my
sure.
perspective shift, I showed up differently and it turned out differently. And I can honestly say that if one hadn't worked out that way, or even both of them, like I would have been annoyed and I probably would have made a choice not to shop at those stores anymore, which is in my control. But like, again, like nothing, there was no like doom attached to it. There was no getting taken advantage of. There was no like, I lost all this money by making a poor choice. Like, I don't know, just like all these weird things that I didn't even realize I had like running in the background.
Well, and I think to me, what also sounds really important is that you were able to let go. Like sometimes we used to get so focused, I know you and I, on why we felt the way we felt. Like, well, why do I
Mm-hmm.
feel this way? And why am I worried about this person? And why am I doing this? And instead, at some point, in order to change your perspective, you just have to realize that what you're thinking about is not rational.
No.
or that it's unhelpful. So it's just an acknowledgement of, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to show up, and this is what I do have control of. And I think that that's a huge difference of not getting stuck sometimes in trying to figure out all the little things and just accepting where you're at with it.
Yeah. And now that I'm thinking about the story and what you just said, the first thing I did was release control of it by just deciding during lunch, like, I'm just going to have a good attitude about it. And like, honestly, it doesn't really matter, Jen. Like, literally, this does not matter. This is not, it does not matter. Like, legit. Like, anyone listening is probably like, why is she even talking about this? But because we all do it on all sorts of things all the time. And you have no idea you're doing it. And then I think what you said, like, that was the first thing. And then the second thing is on the way home, after I had a perspective shift and a totally different outcome than expected, which, by the way, was the outcome I wanted. And yet somehow it was unexpected. Anywho, that's when I was like, oh, I probably kind of need to unpack this a little bit. Because I watched something different happen, which means the stuff I was telling myself was, in fact, not true.
Yeah. And even if it was true and they didn't return it, you discovered you would be okay. And I think the more and more you keep doing that, the healthier and healthier you get. And I think that's what I would say to our listener is there something that's uncomfortable in your life that maybe you are procrastinating about or not wanting to do? Because if it is, take a look at that. It can make a really, really big difference.
Releasing the outcome, like releasing the expectation, like the need over. And I think that's what I really realized. Like, the only control, and this isn't everything in our life, the only control that we really have is how we show up in our perspective. Other than that, like, it's a crapshoot.
For sure.
I mean, honestly, you don't know what you're going to get, and you don't know what that person's been going through that day. Like, you know, and you don't know what's running in their background. Like, you know, we always joke about like, oh, what software is running in the background telling us all these things. Guess what? Everybody has their own software running. So you don't even know what software is running in their background. And these people were both lovely. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And I was like, oh my gosh, they actually agree with me.
Yeah.
But at some point, I had built up in my head that they were going to go to battle with me. Like, battle? Over clothes? Over a runner in my pantyhose? Like, what?
But I think we all do that, right? And that's what you and I keep talking about. And friend that's listening, there has to be something, most likely, that is an uncomfortable subject. When you really listen to that inner voice, you question and say, is this actually reasonable to feel this way? Or is this something I can face head on like you did by releasing control and showing up? So that's all we've got for today.
I hope you discovered something in my story.
See you next time. Same place, same sisterhood. Bye.
Bye.